Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. One of the oldest and most easily recognized gods of Egypt's vast pantheon is Anubis, or Anpu, the lord of the Necropolis, and first of the Westerners. He is described as a jackal, with fur as black as decaying flesh, depicted in art and hieroglyphs as a human man with a jackal's head, and associated with the dead and the afterlife. Anubis has a heavy reputation of being a grim and foreboding figure. But despite common misconceptions, Anubis is not the god of the dead. Rather, he is the god of embalming and of cemeteries, a guardian of graves both noble and common, and a patron of lost souls, orphans, and the helpless. Like many aspects relating to Egyptian mythology, Anubis' origins are shrouded in mystery. Some stories give him Ra and Nephthys as his parents, or Ra and Bastet. Others say he is descended from Hesat and Bastet. Even more stories claim he is a son of Nephthys and Set, or even an illegitimate son of Osiris and Nephthys. In the latter tale, Nephthys tricked Osiris into fathering Anubis by taking the guise of Osiris' wife, Isis. Nephthys told her husband and brother Set that the child was his, but the ruse had failed, and Set planned to murder the child when he was born. Nephthys abandoned the child at birth, hiding him in the marshes of the Nile. The child was then taken care of by jackals, and eventually adopted by Isis, who would raise Anubis as her own. Whatever his origins may be, Anubis rarely ever makes an appearance in the stories of Egyptian mythology. His most prominent role came when Osiris was murdered by Set in a fit of jealousy, hacking his body into pieces, scattering them throughout the land of Egypt. Anubis aided in the search for Osiris' body parts, and went on to mummify Osiris' body, becoming the first mummy. At this point, Anubis relinquished his title as ruler of the dead for Osiris, and he subsequently became the god of embalming. As the god of embalming, Anubis oversaw the mummification process. His priests would wear jackal masks during the ritual practices in order to honor and invoke the god's power and blessing. Anubis would then guide the soul of the deceased to Duat, the Egyptian underworld, not unlike the concept of the Grim Reaper in European folklore. When they would arrive, Anubis would bring the shade to the Hall of Truth, where they would have to pass a simple test. Anubis would remove the person's heart and place it on one side of a large scale, opposite the feather of Maat, which represented truth and order. On one side of the scale was the crane god, Thoth, who would record the verdict, and on the other end was a demon named Ammit, part crocodile, part hippopotamus, part lion, and entirely frightening. If the heart was equal in weight or lighter than the feather, the person would be deemed pure and granted access into the afterlife. But should the heart weigh even the slightest bit more than the enchanted feather, it would signify a life full of sin and deceit. The corrupted soul and the heart would then be fed to the hungry Ammit, doomed to die a second time and suffer eternally. This legend was the reason that the heart was often left intact during the mummification process, whereas the brain would be discarded, and the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines would be transferred to canopic jars. Though Anubis's role in Egyptian mythology was a limited one, his role in the journey of the soul was integral. The gods of any pantheon may act aloof towards mortals, but Anubis was the one god that ancient Egyptians knew at some point they would meet face to face. He was the final judge of character, the sole remaining gateway to everlasting life. In modern times, long since the era of the pharaohs, Anubis has garnered a grim popularity, one that perhaps outshines any other Egyptian god or goddess.